MCPs are all the rage right now. I have a lot of questions, and I actually have an expert that's going to be joining us today to talk a little bit more about this architecture with MCPs and what this means for the state of where we're going with AI. This is unlocking a whole new set of magic in this space where these language models can utilize this protocol. Some say it's like the internet of AI. Others say it's maybe like the Bluetooth of AI, which allows this language model to connect and use these other tools to do these cool things. And so another thing that is making these LLMs really powerful is when you actually give them access to a web browser to do things that humans would normally do. And that capability is really, really fascinating and interesting. And I want to bring on the show someone who's been spending a lot of time thinking about this, and his name is Ani. Welcome to the show, Ani.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ray.
Cool. So tell me more about like MCPs, and I'm pretty sure you've been playing around with them. This is like super crazy times. I feel like I just have a surface level area of what's going on. Just kind of give me like a quick high level, and then we can kind of start digging into how some of this stuff works, and just love to hear what you're thinking here.
Sure. So MCP, it stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's basically a way to, give your model more context on like a specific domain. That could be like a read operation. So like, if you want to give your model context on like internal company stuff, right? You don't want to put that in ChatGPT, but it might be useful to use AI internally, or also to expose actions. So if you wanted your model to basically autonomously do something for you, you can constrain the number of things that it could do, and basically provide like a unified way to define tools that your model can then use to perform an action.
Very cool. Very cool. And so what that means for us is basically like these models can now feel like they, are no longer stuck with whatever training data they've had, because it would take these companies like several years to get all of this internet information and give it these various instructions. So they now start to take on various lives and things. And kind of tell me a little bit more about what you've been looking into with using these MCP servers, and like kind of what types of tasks have you found pretty valuable?
Yeah. So I think generally speaking, like, it's interesting because I think, on the surface level, I think ChatGPT had this thing called ChatGPT plugins way back in like 2022 or like whenever it first came out, which was basically, you could use ChatGPT with other stuff. So you could use a ChatGPT plugin for OpenTable to book you a reservation somewhere. Um, that was really cool, but I think that at the time the LLMs were not that great, and so the plugin marketplace was also not that great, so it didn't really get anywhere. But what MCP was really cool is that it's an open protocol. So, GPT, but also like Anthropic, Gemini, like all these different models can basically be exposed to the same tools. I think it's similar to, like an AI SDK or even like OpenAI making their API format like a universal standard for any LLM to then configure. So I could basically, um, connect to an Anthropic LLM or a DeepMind LLM the same way I would to an OpenAI LLM. So this is taking that one step further, as LLMs become more agentic, as in they could do actions for you. You need you need a way to specify like what it can do, and like how to do it as well.
Ah,
So that's kind of what, yeah, I think MCP is like super cool for.
that's pretty cool.
Hey,
So that reminds me earlier when I got API access maybe a couple years ago to like OpenAI and Anthropic. And like I started playing around. The first thing I played around with, like I think was Crew AI in like 2023, right? December. And I was like, oh wow, agent frameworks. Holy, this is really cool. But any type of action I was thinking, I would like even access to a web browser. I have to literally think through every single step and then map it to code. And then as an engineer, I had to write these specific standards and come up with my own way of organizing the world through my own, data and whatever things. But so now I don't have to do that. Like I also have to throw all the stuff I did away, in terms of like trying to think through and reuse these things and to just kind of keep it more abstract. And a lot of these goals were really trying to tell the language model to, hey, just go down this alleyway to open a web browser. And then like when you're here if you get this information, you get confused, make sure you just at least click this button. And that's how you know you're successful, right? So like that took a lot. That would take like a couple days or even a week's worth of time just to get set up. But today with MCP, you just say, yeah, oh, go do this task and then make sure that button's clicked. Like it's not even like a sentence. And the language model will know using the context protocol. It's like, hey, this person's asking for this. Let me see what tools are available in my little repertoire. Oh, we have a browser thing for Stagehand. Okay, let me go ahead and see if I could use that tool. And let me go ahead and see how I can kind of execute whatever this person's asking for and tell us what's going on. So this is all kind of going down in like one big loop type of thing. And so this is kind of like for someone, if you're just kind of tuning in, figuring out like, how the space has evolved over just the last couple of years and even very shortly in the last 6 months. And then MCP as a protocol is not even like February, January. Is that when it came out?
November, actually. I know, because we pulled an all-nighter to actually be one of the first contributors to it. So.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I remember that.
Whoa. So yeah, that's a little bit of the context for for this type of thing. So yeah, tell me kind of a little bit more about how you've been digging in a little bit further and experiments and things that you're doing.
Yeah, I think what's really cool about MCP, right? I was at this event a couple months ago, and like someone came up to me and he was like, yeah, MCP is like the internet for agents. And I was like, okay, cool, more buzzwords. But I think that, the way we think about it right now is I think like actually akin to the early days of the internet itself, where you think of the internet at its most basic level is this like client server architecture, right? So effectively your browser is like a chat conversation between your computer and some computer in US East 1. And that conversation is just rendered to you through a browser. But that conversation is also not just between your computer and that computer. It's like a conversation between like a client and a server that then can connect to other servers, right? I think you're seeing like, microservice architecture is effectively this, where there's like several different computers all kind of talking to each other to get you one final answer. I think that's the really cool thing about MCP. You're seeing like MCP registries right now where you could connect to an MCP registry that can expose a set of MCP servers directly to your LLM without you having to set up each server individually. These servers can all have their own individual tools. I think the routing of these tools, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, you could have like a docs MCP server that you could expose to your LLM. So that way, if you're coding like a Next.js app, you could expose your Next.js MCP server, which would have the docs for stuff you might find interesting, like ShadCN, Tailwind CSS, TypeScript, etc. And then when you ask this docs MCP questions, it could then route your question to within its own docs, like which specific set of docs are you looking for, if that makes sense. So,
it totally does. Yeah, there's one I saw. It's called Context 7. I'm still playing around with it, and it's really good. You can ask it like the latest questions on the clerk authentication thing, and it's going to go grab the latest stuff, and super useful, especially when they do rewrites for versionings or any new protocol that just gets released like the day of. It's super handy because it does a tool call and it just grabs the documentation and then feeds it right back into the thing with an example. I was like, man, this is incredible. And I think Context 7 is run by Upstash, and either like they're hosting and actively indexing all of this documentation. They have like thousands of documentations, pretty much now indexed, which is really, really cool. Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty wild as far as like this landscape of things. And so I think one thing that I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit too was about tool calling and how the benchmarks are showing that with like Claude Sonnet 3.7, Google Gemini, the more tool calling they do, it's like, hey, they make a tool call, they get some results, and then they do another like either tool call or another call with the LLM to better understand this data. And then I saw in the benchmarking, they said if it does an extended thinking before doing the next tool call, the intelligence level of the model just actually keeps going up. And so it's really interesting because MCPs fit into this type of thing of making it feel a little bit more intelligent. And that means that like, hey, I don't have the data that I'm looking for, or they mentioned something like this. I'm going to go ahead and grab it and see if I can pull that in. And I guess that's why they call it context protocol, because that's actually part of building, one big chain of a context to give to an LLM. Because eventually you get to the step of, now that you have all the information that you need, just like a human, you don't always know what you're doing. You got to walk out the door, you got to make a left turn, you make a right turn, then I finally got my way, right? You can't just get there right away. It's kind of really interesting how we're kind of mimicking the real world here. And so part of this is extremely interesting, especially in tooling. And I want to know a little bit more about this thing that you guys are working on. So you're from a company called BrowserBase, right? Is that what it's called? Cool. And then there's this tool that you guys have. It's called Stagehand.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So Stagehand was built. We actually started building this like about around this time last year, and so it was actually purposely built for AI agents. And at the time, I didn't really get it myself. I was just adding AI to browsers. I think I don't know, like BrowserBase itself is the web browser for AI agents. And so how do you effectively communicate with that browser? Is through Stagehand. Is a way to basically get out of writing broken DOM selectors in Playwright or Selenium, and like a less verbose way of doing that without going fully autonomous, mainly for reliability. I think that in general, right, like you could expose it, with Stagehand itself, you could just do act, extract, or observe, where act is basically like click this button, extract is read this data, and observe is basically like tell me what I'm looking at. And so basically from there, right, you could just, if you could provide these things as JSON to an LLM and have an LLM choose, how do I use these three things to complete a task? It can actually just do that. So when MCP came out, it was like a real hand in glove fit for LLMs being able to use Stagehand tools to autonomously browse the web. And it was just super cool to see.
Wow. That's super duper insightful, because it makes a lot of sense. It's like literally you gave eyes to the AI, and the AI can now see, because like the internet is like the eyes of even our world, right? Like some people are at dinner and they're looking at their phone because they're looking at the internet, right? So it's like, but like now we want the AIs to do that type of thing. And would love to know if you have like been playing around with anything or got any cool stuff that you've been kind of messing around demo wise. And while we kind of get that set up, Billy says like this has been extremely insightful here. So this is pretty cool. If you're watching from X, you can definitely drop the comments. If you're watching from Twitch, YouTube, feel free to ask any questions. We'll be happy to answer and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can jump into a demo here, right? But
Yeah.
Effectively, I mean, he's going.
Let me see if I can put this here. Cool.
Awesome. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and disconnect and reconnect again. I think I'm going to go ahead and, you may have to reconnect the demo because I think your audio kind of chopped up. Yeah.
Okay. Run.
Testing 1 2.
Testing.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Hello. Oh, infinite screen.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, you're good. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, I think so. There's a slight echo. Is that
let me turn you down a little bit. Yeah, you're fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I see. If it's up, there should be a way to mute it.
Testing 1 2. Perfect. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I think more generally, right? Like, I can just do a quick demo of what Stagehand is. This is just like a sample MCP client playground that I built. So hopefully no one saw that, but that was just my MCP config. You can see here, these are the tools that Stagehand can give to an LLM. So we have like the screenshot tool that can show, a screenshot of the page, extract to read data from the page, and act to do stuff. So I can say something like, what's the weather in San Francisco? This is a really dummy example, but one that I think actually kind of pulls everything together as far as what we do. So you can see here that it's calling the navigate tool. If I click on it, I can view the browser-based session associated with it. And so you can see here, like this is a live view into a browser that's being powered by the Stagehand MCP and
Wow.
Claude.
And so that's actually
Uh,
on BrowserBase. So that's somewhere online. Like, that's interesting.
yeah,
Whoa.
it's just somewhere in US West 2.
Oh,
You can see here 62 degrees. And I think the really cool thing, obviously you can do a Google search for the weather.
yeah.
But it's the fact that it's able to know, like, this is what I'm looking at. And you mentioned like you're giving eyes to an LLM.
Yes.
The LLM actually has had eyes for a while, right? It's really just hands that you're giving it. And
Mm.
of course the tools. So now that it can, like, it could always look at a screenshot and say, this is kind of what I'm looking at, but now it can do more than just tell you what it's looking at, but what to do next, which
Oh,
is really
wow.
interesting.
Oh, interesting. So I'm thinking about these environments now because Cursor just released their background agents. So these agents are running in a Unix environment or Ubuntu environment somewhere on Amazon's web service area. And from there, basically, I can give it the browser-based MCP with Stagehand, and then it could just start going off and either testing my own site that's deployed to production or doing these other agentic tasks. Because one of the tasks I have in mind that I was going to try to figure out, it's like, how can I keep doing a design review and making sure my specs are met for mobile, tablet, and like the web. And this is something that's so perfect for Cursor's background agents because then they can just take Stagehand and saying, okay, these are the specs that I have. This is what it's looking like in code. Now I want you to go test it and like tell me what you're seeing. Are the buttons looking alike? Are they overlapping or something, right? And like here's some expectations and give me your opinions. And then I guess can you write out like a screenshot to a file so that like later you can compare and do like test runs? That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like I have so many thoughts here, right? Like
Yeah.
I think what you're mentioning is actually what I did when I was writing the Stagehand docs. I used the Stagehand MCP to basically the prompt was, you are a non-technical PM evaluating Stagehand for your engineering team. Uh, Use these docs to tell me what you think Stagehand is. And it was really cool because then Claude put itself in the position of someone who doesn't know anything about, headless browsers, AI, JavaScript, anything.
Wow.
And then it could say, hey, like, this is what I think Stagehand is. Then you could use that to evaluate, is this what I actually want people to think Stagehand is?
Oh my
Which is
gosh.
super cool, right? Like, I think that was like a really obvious use case, as far as like even PRs and stuff, right? Like when you make a pull request and you make a code change, you could then cross-reference that with the docs and see, how could I update the docs to reflect this change? Are the docs sufficient enough as it is? So that was really, really cool. But I think taking that one step further, effectively what this is doing, if you think about it from like a route planning perspective, right? If I want to get from here to uh, like I'm in San Francisco. So say I want to get from Union Square in San Francisco to Ocean Beach. The Stagehand MCP is basically me going street to street and saying, okay, do I go straight, turn left, turn right, or go back, or am I here? And that's effective, but I think that, one step further would be if I had, Google Maps, right? Which was effectively like a pre-planned step, a list of steps where I could actually just go kind of follow the instructions that were already there for me. This is like really useful, and this is actually why we built Stagehand was because agents are really cool. A lot of people want to only write one line and have an autonomous browser kind of do everything for them. But in the age of AI, uh, humans are basically just liability shields, right? So it's like AI can give you something that's 9 times out of 10 correct, but the 1 time out of 10 that it's wrong, the effects can be devastating. You could think about like healthcare, insurance, government, things that are really boring and oftentimes really stupid, but like mind numbing, but you just need a human to do it because in case the human messes up, you could, they have an incentive to do it well.
I see.
So that's why we're seeing a lot of cases in Stagehand where because we have like, really nice caching and like it's actual just codified instructions as opposed to natural language that could be misinterpreted,
Hmm.
uh, you bring down the liability again to the human who's writing the code as
Hmm.
opposed to the agent just following natural language instructions.
Oh, I see. So how does one start to get started or how do they like think about using this type of platform for, either using it in their AI agents or using it for like an MCP thing. Like what do you suggest for someone to get started? Maybe they're just kind of listening to this like, hey, this sounds really interesting. Is it pretty easy to get set up, or kind of what are they going to be looking into? Like, is it like 5 minutes, or, is this a weekend they get it planned out, that type of thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, for the longest time, we didn't really want to build Stagehand to build autonomous agents,
Mm,
for the exact reasons that I mentioned, right?
yeah.
The people that are like actually paying us real revenue to use Stagehand in production aren't using us for autonomous agents. They're using us to basically save time on writing playwright, because the determinism is really, really important, right? So Stagehand basically helps you write playwright, but with really more flexible DOM selectors. So when you write playwright, you have to basically get, um, you know, playwright is just a browser automation framework. So the stuff where you could say, click this button, type this here, you could write that as code using playwright.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with it is when you say click this button, how you define this button can vary. You could have like 5 different definitions of this button. And if your definition is like a little wrong, then on different page loads, your code could basically just crash.
Mm.
So Stagehand was basically like written such that you could say, click this button, like click the quick start button, and there's only one quick start button on the page. So at runtime, we could use AI to find that specific button and click it. And so
Ah, wow.
basically when you do that, you know exactly how well your AI is doing, because there's a very specific, clear goal, and it either does it or it doesn't. It's a binary result.
I see.
Um, so it's really nice, as opposed to an agent where there's not always like a really like binary right or wrong.
Yes.
If you tell an agent, go fill out this form,
Right.
the order in which it fills out the form matters. Like, doesn't matter if they do it really fast. Doesn't matter if maybe they have a misclick and they self-correct, right? Is
Mm,
that a good thing or a bad thing?
I see.
So I think different people can have different expectations of agents, versus Stagehand actually just lets you just write the thing the way you want it to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so because it's code, it's just, in 2025 with AI, anybody can write code.
Mm.
And so oftentimes it's actually easier to just write the code instead of writing like a 2 to 3 paragraph prompt.
Yes.
So that's a
Yeah,
little.
I remember trying to do that in Python with like, beautiful soup and some other type of things. And then I was also like scraping different things trying to give me these like really weird, like long strings that start with an X and these little weird brackets and stuff. And I'm trying to parse them and trying to find some repeatability somewhere in the browser so that I could, try to repeat tasks like, hey, making sure that if this changed, do this or something like that. Or make sure that when this changes, then send me an email, right? So it's just kind of like really basic things. So now I don't have to go through that pain. I could just say, when this price updates or when this specific field is now gone, it doesn't say, wait list is now available or open or something. When this goes away, now just show me, these types of things. And so that way it's easier to kind of find what you're looking for. But then it sounds like other things like these government documents or these really archaic, web pages that haven't probably been updated for a while are going to be probably a lot easier to automate so that people don't necessarily have to fill out forms. I know like there's like
Oh, for
police
sure.
departments that have these old systems that they don't want to update, but now they could just like somebody can just dictate a police report by just saying, hey, this is all the stuff that happened. It just goes in and starts filling out the form for all the different things. Oh, that's so cool. Dang, that's so useful
Yeah, I
actually.
think
Yeah.
probably the biggest use case for headless browsers, from the get-go, actually. Like the company Plaid, famously was entirely built off of headless browsers. So it's actually really sus. I don't think any company should ever do this again. But when you put your credentials into Plaid, it would basically just take those credentials and open up a browser, log into your bank account, and then get your information that way. Again, looking back, that's kind of crazy that we just let that slide. But effectively, this exactly what you're doing, right? Like what you're saying, where you can just go fill out this like redundant form for this ugly UI of a bank. You can just get the data and present it nicely to a user in your own UI.
Mm. Speaking of your own UIs, I think we had briefly talked about Electron. So like Electron apps that use, so this Stagehand, is it like it's primarily used in Chrome or something like that? Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, so it works effective in just any Chromium-based browser.
Yeah, tell me a
So
little bit more
Chrome
about
is
that like architecture here of kind of what's really happening like in a browser or something, and more specifically, because I think there's a lot of people who may not understand like, Chrome versus like WebKit and, some nuances here, and then Mozilla and then some other things. Yes.
Yeah. So I think you're probably familiar with like 3 different browsers, right? There's WebKit, which is Safari. There's Firefox, and there's Chromium. Chromium is basically an open source, really stripped down browser. Chromium is the more basic version of Chrome itself, which is the browser that we all use, or most of us use. And so, almost every browser that's not Firefox or Safari is based off of Chromium. So like Brave, Dia, Arc, even Microsoft Edge, these are all Chromium based. I think Firefox is Gecko or something. I don't know, but like, yeah, either way, right? So effectively, if you can support Chromium, you can support most of the internet. And most of the internet is built for Chromium because it's like 70% user share or something. And so even beyond that, the browser is actually its own kind of operating system in a way, right? You can do most things in a browser that you could do on your computer. Like Google Drive is, I think, the perfect example of this, right? You could run VS Code in the browser as well. I think the reason for this is that the browser is cross-platform. So if I have a website open on Mac, it's probably going to render exactly the same as on Linux or on Windows. And because of that, if you can make something that renders nicely in a browser, you now just have a cross-platform app. And so Electron basically was like, oh, that's really cool. What if you just didn't have to load this in a browser? You could just load it as a prepackaged app. And so now most of the desktop apps that you run that aren't in a browser are still actually just mini browsers that are just rendering a website to you with like a different logo at the bottom. So like
Like, let's name some
Notion,
popular ones. Yeah, Notion. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like Notion, Linear, VS Code, Discord, I think Slack,
Cursor.
Cursor. Yeah. These are all just, Electron apps that are just mini browsers. So if you can control a browser with Stagehand, you can control most desktop apps as well with the same kind of primitives. So I think that's also something I'm trying to like play with a little bit more of like connecting to these desktop apps using browser-based frameworks
Yes.
and just seeing how far you can take it, right? Because I think the challenge with using Playwright with these desktop apps is getting the right DOM selectors versus now if you don't have to, because you can't inspect element as easily with these desktop apps. But if you just and open cursor, open the terminal, type this thing, and use the cursor composer instead of like the terminal command because you have to use cursor composer within cursor. And I don't want to like reverse engineer cursor itself.
Right.
But if I could do cursor like before cursor background stuff came out, if I could kind of just do it myself, I think it'd be really fun, right? So
I see. Yeah, and spin up like basically drive the user interface. I think you also touch on a different thing for testing frameworks too. So if you're web development testing and you want to load up your app and have it do these types of calls, you can do that. And then I like this headless type of mode. How you're saying it's like doesn't have to be on your machine, right? You can spin up a VM somewhere and then start doing these types of tasks. So what are some of the other like popular use cases right now for Stagehand that people like really aren't talking about very much or very loudly, but they're extremely helpful in maybe some ways that people can kind of think about how they should think about this platform?
Yeah, I think that what's interesting is like the biggest use cases for Stagehand are the ones that people aren't talking about. I think that when you tell people you could automate a browser, people think of their everyday things that they could then automate. They could be like, oh, we can like automate booking a table at a restaurant. But in reality, what we're seeing is that those are cool demos, but what businesses really want is, not full autonomy as we touched on earlier, but um, primarily like government, healthcare, and insurance are the 3 places where it's mind-numbingly boring and repetitive, but you need the human there. And so, yeah, we're seeing people use it for, clinical trial management, getting data on clinical trials, or like pulling data from EHR, ERPs,
Wow.
things that are just really like legacy software.
Yeah.
And the companies behind them have no incentive to update the UI because they're getting paid millions of dollars already for something that's not really like UI first in a way, right? I think you can imagine like a lot of like OpenTable or rather like social media companies that people like are always trying to build social media scrapers and stuff. Those are really bad use cases for browser automation because social media companies, their revenue is from human eyeballs, right?
Mm.
Because they make all their money from ads, and ads are a direct product of human attention. So the last thing they want is more bots that are artificially just generating views that don't convert into like real ad revenue. Um, so yeah, I think like the use cases are actually just the super boring ones, as opposed to, oh, you can like automate Reddit or something.
That's right. No, I think that makes sense because there are a lot of people who are in these different fields, like, yeah, healthcare, government, and stuff. And they're like, man, everyone's getting these cool, sexy AI products, but how can it actually save my life? Because, dude, I'm just stuck in my job. I don't want to, they have the stability or whatever. But imagine getting paid to fill out, these forms that would take you half the day, but then you just spend like a weekend kind of automating that. And now you're at a beach with me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, very jealous, by the way. It must be nice in Hawaii, but yeah, exactly. Right. I think you could, um, with Stagehand, you could build something where it's kind of like, even when I open Cursor, uh, I just kind of just hit tab at this point. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore, right? I'm just kind of, it's just like press the button until the code works.
Right.
And so with BrowserBase, you could just do that for the more mind-numbing and repetitive tasks, right? Basically just, does this look right? If so, page.act.
Mm,
And so just we're building out these workflows that can basically kind of just be that kind of like browser copilot in a way where you don't have to rely on something fully doing something for you and then showing you the end result, which is, again, what people want and what they say they want, but it's just really hard to get that to like a really reliable state.
that's
So
incredible.
until then, what you really want is just a little bit less supervision.
Yeah.
I think in the fullness of time, right?
Yeah.
The uh, the level of involvement of the human in the loop will tend to zero. So we will be doing less, but the level of importance of the human in the loop will tend to infinity. So as
Wow.
we do less, what we do matters so much more.
As we
Um,
do less, what we do will matter so much more, friends. Dude, that's like
right.
pretty deep.
I
Yeah,
mean,
because it's like
it's like
it's all
you
about
think about
attention, right? Well, your focus and your attention. Like, why do you want to spend it
exactly.
that energy? Like that's 40 hours that you were doing. Now you can do something even better, right? Like it's going to actually
Yeah.
unlock the other. Like I feel like every little task is like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, an hour there, death by 1,000 paper cuts. And let's use some of these AI services to kind of get that out of the way for us. Really interesting from Vast CNC. It says, I developed for Google Workspace. This could be a killer for testing.
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing about testing, I think, people hear Playwright and they think,
Hmm.
oh, like I can use AI QA, but AI QA is like, again, really cool to think about, but you actually want your QA to be as deterministic as possible because
Yeah.
you want to make sure that you're giving people exactly what you expect to give them. But on the flip side, the place where people could use Stagehand for QA is actually on like vibe coded apps, right? So you can imagine like you go to like a Bolt or a Lovable or a V0 and you say, build me this app. Um, or even in Cursor Composer, you could say like, when I click this button, I want you to make the background color green. How do you know that it's actually doing that without running the code?
Hmm.
I think that's the really cool thing about Stagehand that I want to build towards is like
Hmm.
when you vibe code something, testing your vibe code using Stagehand and like, running it in the browser and basically just imitating a user behavior to make sure that that's actually happening. But yeah, I think when actual QA on your own product should probably be done with deterministic playwright.
Yeah, that makes sense as far as kind of where this is. And so, since this is Stagehand, as you said, something came out like last year, right? Around this time, was it? Okay. And
Yeah,
then is this like an updated
right. It started
version?
being
Yeah.
built last year around this time.
Oh, okay. Got it. Got
They
it.
released in November. Yeah.
Cool. And so, where can people find out more about this and how they can kind of get started and everything like that?
Stagehand.dev.
Stagehand.dev. Cool. That's awesome. And then, as far as like setup, what do they need to get going? Is it kind of pretty straightforward?
Node.js.
Node.js. Okay.
It's really simple. So basically, we have npx create dash browser dash app. And as long as you have Node.js with like version 20, I think, is the latest. You should be good to go. It's a one-line command.
That's awesome. And then once they do that, they can do basically one of the three actions, right? Like it's like, do something, get data, basically extract it, and then or observe, and then just kind of start playing around with that. That's really cool. And then
Yeah,
they could.
we actually.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do. I think we could do that. We also have native computer use applications. I didn't touch that. I probably should have touched on this earlier, but like the browser is an operating system, so you
Uh-huh.
could use computer use models on the browser. We were like very early partners with OpenAI. We were some of the first to incorporate Anthropic computer use as well.
Ooh.
But we have this primitive called stagehand.agent, which can leverage OpenAI or Anthropic computer use. You can plug and play with one line of code. But it's really cool because I built this thing where you can now, using these computer use models, you could put like OpenAI computer use versus Claude computer use in chess, and seeing which one wins. And it was really cool to see. I think like even behavior wise, OpenAI would just click the thing and move it, versus Anthropic would actually just get super indecisive. It would click like the pawn, and then actually it's like, I want to click the knight. And it would click on like 5 different pieces before actually making the move. Both
Interesting.
models are pretty bad, but it was
Ah.
still really cool to see.
So, for those who don't know, the computer use agents can run on either your local computer or they can run anywhere deployed, or what's the setup for something like that?
Yeah. So basically, the way computer use works is you just send it a screenshot, and then it returns a JSON of like, click this XY coordinate or type this at this XY coordinate or something, right? So
Ah.
how you execute that JSON payload is up to you.
Oh, I see.
So we convert that into Playwright.
Ah, okay, okay. So this makes a little more sense now. So if you have these models from like OpenAI and Anthropic, and specifically, it's like you're giving them a screenshot, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is a computer user interface," and so then they send back basically a structured JSON. And is the structured JSON like something that's consistently programmed, like specific for that
Yeah.
platform? Like OpenAI's JSON return is different from Anthropic's JSON. Okay, so like they're
I think
tied.
I
Okay.
think they could be slightly different, yeah, just depending on what they train their models to do.
Okay.
And I would imagine they would be a little different as well for vendor lock-in. I'm not the expert on that, though.
Okay. No, I was just really curious because this is something that, I've only played on the outside with, but not really kind of dug into any details. And is just trying to like understand what the stack that is here. And then what kind of some of the magic that happens, like in a lot of ways, it's really nice to see kind of what's happening or taking a peek under the hood, even though we may not know all the technicals, because it helps me put the pieces together a little bit, right? So like to understand that this is kind of happening beneath the scenes, and then that hands it over to you guys, and you're like, okay, we know what to do with this now because now we're converting it to these different goals or outcomes of what the user wants. So like Stagehand kind of sits in that interface in the browser because now you're just calling these APIs in the browser to do various tasks that were normally as a user for me. I would have to write code to like parse it out, and so it kind of like saved me a lot of headache. And yeah, so it sounds like I could run this, headless or so forth in some type of environment, and then use these agents to do different things. That's really cool. Wow. So computer use from OpenAI or Anthropic will help drive like computers, and like their specialty is to use these types of models specifically to like drive those things. And eventually, for me, I mean, to be honest, you know what I'm experiment with is like the Ray Fernando tech support bot, because like everyone hits me up all the time, all family members, like, yo, can you help me with this one thing? It's like, oh yeah, open settings, do this, and just toggle this off. They're like, that's it. I was like, yeah,
Whoa.
I've been spending out like a whole week on this. It's like, yeah, it's just, it's just this setting, but it's like, I have all this knowledge from using these products for decades that like, it's just like one shot, right? Like, oh, I went to the Apple store and I talked to like 3 people and no one knew. It's like, yeah, this is obscure
Yeah,
data, it's like,
exactly. I think like the complexity, for example, right? Like it was just ChatGPT with the internet. And I think that was their proprietary web search model. I think with MCP is just because it's an open protocol, like I'm waiting for that perplexity moment, right? Where it's like any model, any tool, you pick and choose, like as a consumer app, I think that would just be really powerful. So
Yeah, I'm curious
Yeah.
where you see this landscape going. I know you got to roll out pretty soon, stuff like that. Kind of like, what's your thought? Like, what are you dreaming of? Like, you're kind of talking about this scenario a little bit. Like by the end of 2025, like, what would you really want to like land, like almost near term, to be like, oh my god, this is going to really push things forward for me, or like a wish list maybe from a model provider or some startup that can really help you with whatever you're doing. I'm just really curious.
I think something I've been thinking about a lot recently is like, harkening back to the beginning of this conversation, right? If MCP is the internet for agents, what does Chrome look like, right? You think a lot about like MCP servers. There's a lot of people out there making MCP servers really easy to use, effectively kind of building something like a Vercel or something like that, where it's just really easy to kind of like plug and play and let anybody use your software. What I think people aren't building as much on, and I think it's because the protocol is changing so rapidly, is like what does the browser look like? Like how do you actually
Mm.
use these MCP servers in a meaningful way? I think it's like there's a lot of like interface tweaking that we'd have to do. But if you think about the amount of like chat interfaces that we use on a day-to-day basis as like software engineers, and I would, as we build for other people as well, uh, you know, so many different chat interfaces, right? Like ChatGPT, I use the Dia browser, which has a chat built in. I use like Cursor, which is a chat, OpenAI Codex, like all these things are just chats. And so if MCP can effectively unify all your LLMs and all your tools, what does that interface look like? And where does it reside? I don't think it'll be ChatGPT, right? Because it's now any model, any tool. People want to use their proprietary, like, company tools, maybe not with regular ChatGPTs. So
Oh
I think just
wow.
generally building for that kind of future where maybe the only software like we have. I don't know. I don't want to get too
Like
visionary,
philosophical. Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, like
I really love that thought. It's just kind of blending a lot of these worlds together, and it's just almost being self-serving. It's like, well, this is the best home for them. Of course, it's just kind of what an operating system has done, right? Like it's literally becoming the operating system because so many people are already using it. And it's, I think, was it you that was telling me that I mean, protocols, right? Going back to protocols, HTML, like computers are literally just, text wrappers, right? They just literally parse text.
yeah, yeah. That's the coolest part, right? Because I think that's basically like the hypothesis that we built Stagehand on was like
Hmm.
Stagehand when it was first built had no images in it. It was just purely analyzing the DOM itself. And it was just exactly that hypothesis that, this whole job of a browser is to take structured text like HTML and JavaScript and CSS and render it in a nice way to a user. So realistically, you don't need to render it to send that to an LLM because LLMs are really good at analyzing nested structured data. So uh, yeah, it's really cool to see the hypothesis play out.
Wow. Wow. And hopefully the future of the browser will just kind of say like, yeah, I can take in these models, I can do these types of tasks. And then we go beyond the chat interfaces and we start to go to more experiences. And browsers are great because they're extremely lightweight. You can ship them. I mean, they're literally shipped on the Apple Watch itself, right? That's like WebKit, but you can ship a Chrome-like thing that does take very little energy that can do, lightweight model tasks without, much protocol changes or something. And then shipping apps is just already, we were doing that already with Electron. So it's like, I mean, it's kind of like, it just seems like the natural progression, but no one's really talking about this. And I'm so glad, I mean, to really have you on the show because it's so rare to have someone who's really spends a lot of time thinking very deeply about these types of problems. And Ani's amazing over there at BrowserBase working on things like this, like Stagehand. So I definitely would encourage you to check these things out. I'm going to definitely be checking this stuff out as part of my stack to do these types of tasks because I want to stay up on these types of like developments. And I'm so happy to have you on the show so that my audience can actually, get to kind of know kind of what's going on because I feel like whatever you guys have coming down the pipeline, maybe a month from now, a couple of months from now, we'll just kind of set people up and be like, okay, I see where the puck is going now type of thing. I don't have any inside baseball knowledge. This is not a sponsored post or anything like that. This is just me as an engineer. Like cool people reach out or I reach out to cool people and, they hit me up and it's like, dude, let's just chat. Like, let's hang out, get into the room and stuff, and kind of like, really start talking about what's going on in the field. So, no, definitely appreciate you coming on the show. You guys are definitely welcome back to come again, and like excited to keep up with kind of what you guys are cooking up next.
Thanks so much, Ray. Yeah, just had a great time here. Always happy to chat about MCPs or browsers or anything. So thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Awesome. I'll catch y'all later. And I know we have a couple questions. I think I'm going to see if I can get to them like on X and stuff like that. If you want to go ahead and reach out at RayFernando1337, where can they find you, Ani?
Twitter, at Kamathematic on Twitter.
Okay. At Kamathematic. Awesome. Yeah, I'll repost you. I'll tag you on the thing as well. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you probably tomorrow or this weekend. We're going to be doing more stuff with AI tool calling. I know Cursor just released a bunch of announcements with the background agents. Windsurf Wave 9 just dropped. So we're going to be trying to take a look at that tonight maybe or tomorrow and take a look and see what's going on with this new SWE model. So, all right, y'all. I'll catch y'all later. Peace.